Why are the people starving? Because the rulers eat up the money in taxes. Therefore, the people are starving. Why are the people rebellious? Because the rulers interfere too much. Therefore, they are rebellious. Why do the people think so little of death? Because the rulers demand too much of life. Therefore, the people take death lightly. Having little to live on, one knows better than to value life too much. This chapter builds off the one before it. Whereas yesterday, Lao Tzu discussed how complicated the death penalty can be, this chapter builds on this theme of taking death lightly. There are many reasons why a population goes hungry, but one reason, especially in ancient times, or under authoritarian governments, is overtaxation. I'd like to think that in our time, democratic mechanisms usually stop taxes from getting this bad. But in Lao Tzu's time, these political mechanisms did not exist, and rulers could sometimes become extreme burdens upon their people. This runs totally contrary to Lao Tzu's ideal, which is for a ruler to take responsibility for nurturing and protecting the people. This ideal fits in with the idea of the king as a sort of father protector, which was a big part of the appeal for having a king in ancient and feudal society. However, as we know, kings and rulers did not always fulfill this role, and could sometimes make life extremely hard on those they ruled. As these abuses continued, people became disenchanted with the father protector idea, and now, government tends to look a lot different in the developed world. But this was all well after Lao Tzu's time, and so Lao Tzu gives a lot of advice for how these rulers ought to conduct themselves. He constantly urges them not to impose themselves upon those they rule, but to take care of them, and to treat the people's lives as if they were their own. This advice applies to us today as well, whether we lead or not. Don't impose yourself on others. Look for what you can do for them, rather than seeing people through the lens of what they can do for you. Make their needs equal with your own. Going back to the relationship between rulers and subjects, when rulers make life intolerable for those they rule, these people begin to take death more lightly. They do not hold on so tightly to lives that have ceased to feel as if they were worth living. Therefore, they are more inclined to put their lives in jeopardy by rising up against the rulers who made their lives so intolerable. If we treat people with respect, they will usually respect us. If we do not, they will resist us. This lesson seems like it should be common sense, but history continues to show us that humanity has yet to learn it. I do not think that society will be able to improve or advance in any meaningful way until this basic lesson is integrated. We may make technological, medical, and social advances, but all of these advances will fail to create a good society if our basic morality is still unchanged. One bad apple spoils the bunch, and morality is a pretty big apple. It tends to influence every aspect of our society and our lives. In order for our society to improve, its people and leaders must improve first. The irony of all this, of course, is that great suffering at the hands of bad governments, or just suffering in general, can teach us lessons that can sometimes be hard to learn otherwise. In this case, the lesson of not valuing our lives too much. Surrendering to the fact that our lives and the lives of those around us are transient and can leave us at any time is one of the basic principles of Taoism, and leads to increased peace. But this lesson, ironically, is hardest to learn when our lives are going well. When our lives are pleasant, we hold on to them all the more. This is another example of how bad circumstances can sometimes bring about good outcomes. It would of course be best if we could learn this lesson even while our lives were going well, but it remains true that sometimes adversity is the best teacher. The lessons we learn in the worst times of our lives sometimes are the ones that bring us the most benefit. So throughout our discussions of politics and society and how to make the best ones possible, we need to remember that perhaps suffering is not only unavoidable, but is part of the plan. Not that we shouldn't try to live our lives in ways that minimize our suffering and the suffering of others, but at the end of the day, we should remember that all political systems are imperfect because they make use of imperfect people, and every government will have issues. In politics, as in life, I don't think it's possible to avoid suffering altogether. Unlike some philosophies which seek to transcend or eliminate suffering, Taoism acknowledges the reality of suffering and teaches us not to resist it, but to accept it, adapt to it, and learn from it. If you have any thoughts about this, you can leave them in the comments or come hop into my Discord, which I'm using as a space for these kinds of discussions to take place. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow for Chapter 76. Peace and blessings.